Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaridhari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaridhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tiram Banachari. Jamuna Tiram Banachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gopi Jana Balabha Girivaridhari. Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana. Jamuna Tiram Banachari. Jamuna Tiram Banachari. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari. Gaura Premanandi. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udirayed Nasta Prayeshvabhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Utamashloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. This morning we're beginning the third canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this auspicious day in the month of Purushottam Mas, auspicious month. The third canto is the story of Vidura and Maitreya, and the discussions that they have constitute the third and fourth canto. Okay, so these are extensive cantos, two very lengthy cantos, cantos 3 and 4. So to preface the verse today, which focuses on Vidura, I want to start with a little background, just so there's some context to these discussions. So Vidura is the key person in the third canto, fourth canto. Vidura means one who is Vidura, one who has no fault, and who is a very pure person. The story of Vidura begins long ago when the king of the earth, Shantanu, met this beautiful daughter of a fisherman. He was out hunting, which kings are prone to do because it helps them sharpen their martial skills. But on his excursion, he met this beautiful maiden who was ferrying passengers across the river. So she was the daughter of the head of the village of the fishermen. And this princess, really, of the fisherman village was not very interested in her father's profession, and indeed the whole culture of fishing and living off the river like that. So she had this other engagement of ferrying passengers across the river, so she didn't directly have to do the fishing. And on the other side of the river there was a group of Brahmins who lived, so she would enjoy going there to have their association. She was very Brahminical by nature. But in this service, she had once encountered a great sage named Parasara, who was being ferried across the river. And in the course of the journey, he became captivated by the beauty of this young maiden. So he said to her, I want to have a child with you. And she said, I can't do that. I am unmarried, and you're a sadhu, and this would be so inappropriate. Plus people would see here in the river. So he said, don't worry, I will, with my mystic power, I will impregnate you. You will give birth immediately, and no one will see, as I'll create some mystic fog. So just by mantra, he gave her a child who was born there on the spot, and this child came fully grown. And from his mother's womb, he paid his obeisances and said, now, mother, I'm going to the Himalayas to meditate, but if you ever need me, just think of me. And who was this remarkable sage? Vyasadeva, yes, Vyasadeva. So he later became the compiler of the Vedic literature. So this mystic experience was very obviously dramatic to the young maiden, but she carried on with her services. And later, when King Shantanu came, he also became captivated by her beauty and said, oh, please, he went to her father actually and said, please let me marry your daughter. So the fisherman, the head of the fishermen, was very shrewd, and he said, no, I cannot let you marry my daughter because you already have another son named Bhishma, and he will become the king, and my daughter's children will not become the king. So Shantanu, being very fond of his son Bhishma, left the place sadly without concluding his desire. So then Bhishma saw that his father was depressed, and he said, what's wrong? His father wouldn't say anything. So he retraced his father's steps and found this fisherman's village. So he went to the fisherman and said, what happened? The fisherman told him the whole story. He said, my father's the king, you should grant his request. And he said, no, you'll become the king. I want my daughter's sons to be kings. He said, well, then I will renounce the kingdom. I will never accept the throne. But the fisherman was very shrewd, and he said, but what if you marry and have children? Then they'll want to take the throne. So Bhishma then said, I shall never marry. So for a warrior, for a prince, this is a very, very severe vow. In fact, when he said this, the heavens opened and the demigods showered flowers and said, Bhishma, Bhishma, which means great vow. So that's how he got his name. So by his sincere care for his father was able to marry this beautiful maiden. They had 2 sons. This is a big deal for kings. They always want heirs to the throne. So their 2 sons were born, and they were, Bhishma arranged for one of them to be married to 3 princesses, Amba, Ambika, and Ambalika. So Amba means mother, Ambika means little mother, and Ambalika means little tiny mother. They were sisters. Now, unfortunately, their husband, Vichitravirya, died before they could have their sons. So the kingdom was without an heir, as Shantanu had left. Vichitravirya was ruling, but then he died prematurely. So Satyavati was very distraught. How am I going to continue our dynasty? then she remembered her son Vyasadeva. So she meditated and Vyasadeva came. And just like that, he said, "What would you like me to do, mother?" So she said, "In this age, it is allowed in the scriptures for a brother to impregnate his brother's wife under emergency circumstances. So I want you to please father an heir to the throne since your brother has died." So she said, he said, "Yes, mother, I would be glad to do that, but if you had given me a little notice, I would have come prepared. I've been meditating in the mountains for decades. I have my long matted locks and beard, and I've been living in the forest as a hermit. So, I could have prepared." She said, "There isn't time." So he said, "All right." And the 3 daughters, actually there were just 2 at this point. Amba had left. She had another story. But Ambika and Ambalika were the remaining wives of Vichitravirya. And Vyasadeva looked frankly like a hippie. Something frightening. So when he conceived a child with Ambika, Ambika closed her eyes tight. "I can't look at this." So as a result of their union, their son was born blind because his mother's eyes were shut. And so this child was not going to be eligible to be the king because of his disability. So again, he tried with the other wife, Ambalika, and hearing what had happened with her sister, she kept her eyes open, but she was frightened by the sight of this hairy sage. So her son was born with vision, but he was pale because she was frightened. But he was healthy, and he was named Pandu, which means pale. So Pandu became the king. But just in case there was a need for a third heir in another emergency, Satyavati approached Ambika again and said, "I want you to have another son since the first one didn't work out." And she said, "Okay," but she didn't really want to do it. So at the last minute, she substituted one of her maidservants into the chamber, and this maidservant was very pure and very simple, and she simply pleased Vyasadeva. So Vyasadeva gave her the child, and this child was born as a very saintly person. That was Vidura. But because he was born not of the queen but of the maidservant, he was also not eligible for the throne. So therefore Pandu became the king. The elder son was named Dhritarashtra, and although he was blind, he was very determined to somehow become the king. That's the meaning of Dhritarashtra, one who is determined to rule, Dhritarashtra. So as Dhritarashtra and Pandu grew up, Pandu had 5 sons. Dhritarashtra had, by some mystic circumstance, 100 sons. But Pandu, being the king, had the right to turn the kingdom over to his sons. However, Pandu also died untimely. So therefore his young sons were not eligible to ascend to the throne. So Bhishma became the caretaker for the time being, and Dhritarashtra as well. So Dhritarashtra, seeing his sons deprived of what he felt was their birthright, felt that these sons of Pandu should be somehow repressed and somehow eliminated so that his sons could ascend to the throne. And this is exactly what is described here in these first verses of the 3rd canto. I'm summarizing the story here with some background so that you can have some context. And we won't read the texts, we're just going to go to number 17. But suffice it to say that Dhritarashtra was not the greatest uncle in the world. He arranged for a vacation house to be built for the sons of Pandu. He said, "Why don't you go out and have a nice time? Well, you can go to this beautiful Airbnb that I have arranged." And in fact, he had built it with wood that had been soaked in turpentine, so that it was very, very flammable. So his plan was the Pandavas would go, and then in the middle of the night they would light the house on fire and they would all be killed that way. So this is exactly what happened, except before the fire was set, Vidura came, knowing of the plot, and told the Pandavas, who were just young men, you have to escape. In fact, Vidura arranged for an engineer to dig a tunnel, secret escape tunnel from the house. And the Pandavas used that the night the house was burned down, so everyone thought they had been killed in the fire. But in fact, they had escaped and went into hiding. So this was the conniving plotting of Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana. Later, when the Pandavas were ready, they came out of hiding, and everyone was... the pious were very pleased, and Dhritarashtra and his eldest son Duryodhana had to pretend to be pleased. Oh, we're so glad to see you. So Vidura, meanwhile, remained in the throne room as an advisor for Dhritarashtra until the Pandavas were eligible to assume the throne. And then he was always counseling his elder brother, don't be so cruel to your nephews. Just give them some share of the kingdom. Share the kingdom and everything will be fine. But Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana were never willing to do that. And they made other plots how to capture the Pandavas' share of the kingdom. One of their plots was by a game of dice that was loaded. So Yudhisthira, the head of the Pandavas, lost all of his claims to the throne in a dice game. But then he got them back. But then he lost them again. So all of this plotting was going on. And Vidura was always saying, look, you shouldn't be so cruel to the Pandavas. And finally Duryodhana got so angry, he said, just leave. He ordered his soldiers, just beat him to within an inch of his life and throw him out with nothing. But instead of fighting, Vidura put his bow on the edge, on the door, and walked out of the palace, just determined now to go and have nothing more to do with these hideous relatives of his. So this is where we meet Vidura, having just left the palace, his advice being ignored. He's now going out on pilgrimage. And this is where we take up today's verse. Is that all right? Did I miss any key details? Okay. Jose, you follow all this? Okay, good. It's a lot to take in. So, after summarizing the entire Mahabharata, now now let's do the Sanskrit for this verse, if you would, please. Sa nirgata kaurava punya labdho gaja vaya yat tirthapada padani anvakramat punya chakirsha yorvyam adhishtito yani sahasramurti. Time's a little short, so let's just go to the synonyms. Huh? Let's say these together, please. Sa, he, Vidura, nirgata, after having quit, Kaurava, the Kuru dynasty, Punya, piety, Labdha, so achieved, Gaja, avayat, from Hastinapur, Tirtha Pada, of the Supreme Lord, Padani, pilgrimages, Anva Kruma, took shelter, Punya, piety, Shakir Shaya, desiring so, Urvyam, of high grade, Adhishtita, situated, Yani, all those, Sahasra, thousands, Murti, forms. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. By his piety, together please, yes. By his piety, Vidura achieved the advantages of the pious Kauravas. After leaving Hastinapur, he took shelter of many places of pilgrimages, which are the Lord's lotus feet. With a desire to gain a high order of pious life, he traveled to holy places where thousands of transcendental forms of the Lord are situated. Okay, so this is a long purport. I'd like to ask if everyone could read a paragraph and then pass on the mic. Okay.
Vidura was undoubtedly a highly elevated and pious soul. Otherwise, he would not have taken his birth in the Kaurava family. To have high parentage, to possess wealth, to be highly learned, and to have great personal beauty are all due to past pious acts. But such pious possessions are not sufficient for obtaining the grace of the Lord and being engaged in his transcendental loving service. Vidura considered himself less pious, and therefore he decided to travel all the great places of pilgrimage in the world in order to achieve greater piety and advance nearer to the Lord. At that time, Lord Krishna was personally present in the world, and Vidura could have at once approached him directly, but he did not want to do so because he was not sufficiently freed from sin. One cannot be 100% devoted to the Lord unless and until he is completely free from all effects of sin. Vidura was conscious that by the association of the diplomatic
Dhritarashtra
and Duryodhana, he had lost his piety and was therefore not fit to associate at once with the Lord. In Bhagavad Gita 7:28, this is confirmed in the following verse.
Everyone chant, please. Yesham twanta gatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanir mukta bhajante mam trida vrataha. This verse means that only those who have acted piously in this life and in previous lives can take shelter of Krishna. Next paragraph, please. Yeah.
Persons who are sinful asuras like Kamsa and Jarasan cannot think of Lord Krishna as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Absolute Truth. Only those who are pure devotees, those who follow the regulative principles of religious life as prescribed in the scriptures, are able to engage themselves in karma yoga, then jnana yoga, and thereafter by pure meditation, can understand pure consciousness. When God consciousness is developed, one can take advantage of the association of pure devotees. Syan mahat sevaya vipra punya tirtha nishevana. One is able to associate with the Lord even during the existence of this life.
Places of pilgrimages are meant for eradicating the sins of the pilgrims, and they are distributed all over the universe just to give facility to all concerned for attaining pure existence and God realization. One should not be satisfied, however, merely by visiting the places of pilgrimage and performing one's prescribed duties. He should be eager to meet the great souls who are already there, engaged in the service of the Lord. In each and every place of pilgrimage, the Lord is present in his various transcendental forms.
This verse refers to another verse from the 10th canto, the Srimad Bhagavatam. So much of Prabhupada's purports is just paraphrasing other portions of the scriptures. And Nautam, I'm sure you know this section, this verse that's being referred to. This is when Krishna went to meet with all of his family members and his friends in Vrindavan at Kurukshetra. And there it is said that people who are ignorant think that the place of their birth is worshipable, and they only go to a place of pilgrimage to take a bath. It's very pious to take a bath in a holy river, but the actual purpose of going to a holy place is to associate with the saintly persons there. So this is the paraphrased verse Prabhupada is referring to. Okay, please go ahead.
These forms are called Archa Murtis, or forms of the Lord, which can be easily appreciated by the common man. The Lord is transcendental to our mundane senses. He cannot be seen with our present eyes, nor can he be heard with our present ears. To the degree that we have entered into the service of the Lord, or to the proportion that our lives are freed from sins, we can perceive the Lord. But even though we are not free from sins, the Lord is kind enough to allow us the facility of seeing him in his Archa Murtis in the temple. The Lord is all-powerful, and therefore he is able to accept our service by presentation of his Archa form. No one, therefore, should foolishly think the Archa in the temple to be an idol. Such an Archa Murti is not an idol, but the Lord himself. And to the proportion that one is free from sins, he is able to know the significance of the Archa Murti. The guidance of a pure devotee is therefore always required.
This is the big knock, isn't it, on Krishna consciousness, that we worship idols. And it's very hard for people, particularly in Protestant and Islamic traditions, to accept. In Islam, the founder of the faith was noted for destroying all the idols. What happened was that the city of Mecca was a trading center in the Middle East. And many tribes would come to trade. So the business proprietors in Mecca decided they'd build this big shopping center, big trading center, with deities representing each of the various tribes, because they all worshiped their own idea of God. So there were all these deities collected around this trading facility. So then Muhammad came in and declared there's only one true God, and he broke all the idols in his revolution, in his spiritual revolution. So this is why it's a foundational belief of Islam that you should never worship any idol. And similarly, in Protestantism, the idea of idol worship is condemned based on the Old Testament, where Abraham went up to Mount Sinai to receive the commandments from God, and the Jewish people who were following him behind got impatient and created an idol. They made a golden calf and began worshiping that. So when Moses came down, having been given instructions from God, he saw them worshiping this idol, and he was very upset. So again, in the Protestant faith and in Islam, they say anything to do with idol, this is immediately heathenism. It's very unreligious. And therefore, the whole idea of Archa Murti to them is just like the complete opposite of theology. Catholicism, on the other hand, is a little more open-minded, and the statues of Jesus or Mary, these are part of the Catholic practice, and so they can relate to the idea of deities more readily. So what is the difference between deity and idol? An idol means something that one has made up in one's mind and worshipped. Oh, are you going to say yes?
I was going to ask if by idol you meant like human sages, but to answer your question, I think idols are like human sages, Jesus. But what's the other one?
Muhammad?
No, you said
Oh, the
deities.
deity. The deity. Yeah.
I think deities, I guess, could be considered like angels, or for this faith, it would be demigods.
Demigods.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Well, like you see all of these beautiful dancing figures here. These are demigods coming to the kirtan, angels. And there are also angels in the kirtan who become angelic by the power of the holy name, despite less than angelic backgrounds. But the deity is a different category. It's like Krishna is Devi Deva, the God of gods. He is the supreme personality of Godhead. And the deity form of the Lord is not something that has been concocted in one's own mind. So you describe those deities as personalities like Jesus or Muhammad. And these are called the like gurus or acharyas who represent God. But the deity is God himself. That's the idea. Archa Murti means that we can see Krishna even with our unspiritualized senses. We can see him, we can serve him, we can worship him, we can appreciate him, we can pray to him. He is coming to us in a form that is visible even to us in our conditioned state. Now, the form of Krishna is described in great detail in all the scriptures. Venum Kwanvantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksham. He's playing a flute, he has a peacock feather in his hair. So the form of Krishna is not somebody's imagination. And if somebody says, well, God can't appear as a statue, then why are you placing this limit on God? You see, in the Old Testament, God appeared to Moses, but in the form of a burning bush. And Moses worshipped him. So was Moses a bush worshiper? You know, God had appeared to him in that way. And so he was reciprocating. So similarly, Krishna appears to us in the form of the deity. And the deity is practically experienced that when we serve the deity, we feel detachment from material life. We feel transcendental happiness. All the joy that comes from serving the deity is what drives the devotees forward in their spiritual life. So there's an immediate and tangible reciprocation. That's the idea of deity worship. Therefore, in all of these holy places, there are deities of the Lord in his various forms. So people think, sometimes mistakenly, that because Krishna comes in many forms, devotees of Krishna are polytheists. They worship many, many gods. But there's just one supreme personality of Godhead who appears in a great variety of ways. It's not polytheism, but monotheism. It's just that we do not place a limit on our monotheistic deity. He can do whatever he wants. If he wants to come this way, that's up to him. We don't place any limit. So even to say that God could not come in the form of a deity, isn't it, is a huge limitation. What if he wants to do that? If he wants to do that, who are we to say he can't? So this is a little theological background about the Archamurti. And as Prabhupada writes here, we need guidance from those who are experienced in spiritual life in order to properly understand the deity and how to worship the deity. In fact, when Srila Prabhupada introduced the deity worship in our Sangha, in ISKCON, he just made it very, very simple. Anyone remember the first deities that were worshipped in ISKCON? Jagannath, yes, in San Francisco. One of our god sisters, Malati, was in the Indian import store and saw these little carved figures. So she what do they call the three-finger discount? She shoplifted and brought it back to Srila Prabhupada and said, "What is this?" Prabhupada folded his palm and said, "Oh, Jagannath has come." So he asked her husband, Shyamasundar, to carve deities, full-size deities of Lord Jagannath, even bigger than this. So he took that service up. Prabhupada considered it so auspicious that Lord Jagannath had come that he assumed, okay, Krishna, Lord Jagannath must want to be worshipped here. So Shyamasundar carved the deities. He would leave his pack of cigarettes on the top of Lord Jagannath as he was working. Prabhupada came in and admonished him. He didn't tell him to stop. He said, just reduce by one every day. And every time you're smoking one, just remember, I'm hurting my spiritual master with each one. So in this way, Shyamasundar was able to stop smoking by the time the deities were finished. And then the deities were installed in the temple, and Prabhupada implemented the most simple kind of worship. He just said everybody could come and offer some flower to the deity. There was no pujari, there was no arti. It was just, the devotees would have kirtan, and they would take turns offering flowers, and then one lamp on a tray. Everyone in the congregation would come and offer it, the same lamp to Lord Jagannath. That's how it began. So the devotees were very inspired by worshipping Lord Jagannath, and then they decided to take him out to Golden Gate Park for kirtan one day without telling Prabhupada. So there's pictures of this kirtan with Lord Jagannath out, and the devotees are playing, and Prabhupada is sitting very tolerantly. And afterwards he told them, don't ever do that again. The deity is supposed to stay in the temple. So when he saw the devotees were capable of caring for the deity, he began to introduce the various practices of deity worship. And he told them, if he told them all the details, they would faint. There's thick books full of all the intricate ways that you can worship the deities. But does anyone know what is the highest standard of deity worship? Narada Pancharatra? Well, I was looking for a little simpler answer. What's that? Yeah, a standard you can maintain nicely. So we don't want to start with elaborate standards and then have to cut back. That's an offense. Better to keep, as Prabhupada did, just he kept adding little bit, until he had a standard that was sustainable for the devotees. So this is how deity worship began. And Jagannath is particularly merciful. Gaura Nitai are even more merciful. Radha Krishna, however, if we're going to worship Radha Krishna, we have to be prepared to keep a high standard. So this is the triumvirate of deities in our Sangha. Gaura Nitai, Jagannath, and Radha Krishna. Any comments before we go on? RDK, Prabhu? The mailbox, yes. So please, yes,
Plain in Maha.
Oh, okay. All right. So yes, Prabhupada gave the example that if you make up a form of God or an idol and worship it, it's like making a mailbox that looks like a real post box but isn't authorized by the government. So you may cut it, paint it, and put your mail in, but it won't go anywhere. So our idols are godlike deities in our society, are like big movie stars, music stars, politicians. You know, they become our deities. And people actually think, if I just follow this person, my life will be perfect. So in the Gita, Krishna explains that this kind of misdirected worship, it doesn't help the person except in the sense that they are at least giving some credit to somebody better than themselves. And the preliminary or even erroneous deity worship, Krishna is so gracious. Even that will help make a person's faith steady, he says, and will help them go forward in their spiritual life. So we don't condemn idol worship, we just don't practice it. We don't, if people are making up the mailbox, okay, at least they're trying to express their God consciousness, however erroneously. But in Krishna consciousness, by the grace of Srila Prabhupada, we have the authorized deity, and practically we see if we offer our love to the deity, Krishna reciprocates. There's many, many stories of this, but personally one can experience it also. Thank you. Okay. Let's go on. Next paragraph.
In the land of Bharatvarsha, there are many hundreds and thousands of places of pilgrimage distributed all over the country. And by traditional practice, the common man visits such holy places during all seasons of the year. Some of the archer representations of the Lord situated in different places of pilgrimage are mentioned herewith. The Lord is present at Mathura, the birthplace of Lord Krishna, as Adi Keshava. The Lord is present at Puri, Orissa, as Lord Jagannath, also known as Purushottama. He is present at Allahabad, Prayag, as Bindu Madhava, and Mandara Hill he is present as Madhusudana. In the Anandaranya he is known as Vasudev. Padmanabha and Janardhan. At Vishnu Kanchi he is known as Vishnu, and at Mayapur he is known as Hari. There are many millions and billions of such archer forms of the Lord distributed all over the universe. All these archamurtis are summarized in the Chaitanya Charitamrita in the following words. Prakashatana bhaktishu kadite jagatera adharmana shidharma.
Go ahead. That's the end of it. Go ahead, read this last sentence, please.
The Lord has so distributed himself all over the universe just to give pleasure to the devotees, to give the common man facility to eradicate his sins and to establish religious principles in the world.
Chai. So the appearance of the Lord as in the deity form is just to help us. It's to help us have a very tangible connection with God. Did anyone experience this? Coming to, especially those who have come to Krishna consciousness after being brought up in other traditions. Do you experience the connection, reciprocation with the deity? Arjuna, you're nodding your head. Do you have anything you want to share any experience with the deities?
I was thinking about the first time when I walked to the temple and I saw Srila Prabhupada in the Murti. and I thought for a moment that there was like I didn't know who Srila Prabhupada was at the time, but I thought it was like a monk, and I stood in front of him actually in this part of the temple for like an hour, just like waiting, because I was thinking, well, at some point he's gonna acknowledge that I'm here, and he's maybe gonna call me, or he's just gonna. So I'm just like in my mind I'm meditating, and for a while I thought that it was like a real person. So that was sort of like my first impression. At the time the curtains were closed, so Prabhupada was like the first motif.
So
And many times when I came following that instance to pray to Radha Kalachandji, in my mind I thought that they were sort of moving. So I had a personal connection in a way that I hadn't experienced before, even being brought up as a Catholic, where we have different saints, and to me it was always like very sculptural, but it was nothing as the form of Krishna. It was more of like a personal personal form that I could relate to.
nice. You were waiting for Prabhupada to do something, and in that waiting you were connecting. Srila Prabhupada said that we can approach the deities, as you said, to pray, and that prayer, that ideal prayer, is for what? For service. Krishna, Hare Krishna, please let me serve you. Because it's a privilege to serve the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Even Vidura knew Krishna, and Krishna was personally present there, but he did not go directly to Krishna himself. Instead, he went to these places of pilgrimage to worship these deities and be purified before he could have the qualifications to directly approach Krishna. So that's very instructive for us also. We worship the deity with this idea of purification. When we install the deity, there's many rituals. When we bathe and dress the deities every day, there's high standards. You have to be trained and qualified by your personal character in order to worship the deity in this intimate way. So it purifies us and leads us to higher and higher practices in our devotional lives. The deity in the temple is for everybody, and then mostly householders want to have deities at home also. Once Srila Prabhupada called that redundant. He said if you live near the temple, then worshiping the deities, why worship the deities at home? Everyone should come and worship in the temple. That was in Los Angeles. However, things have changed. In those days, everybody had full-time service in the temple, so it made sense. But when you have work responsibility, scheduling doesn't allow you to go to the temple every day, then having the deities in the temple at home is also nice. However, the deity worship is called Pancharatrika Vidhi. Pancharatrika Vidhi means all the rules and regulations that are practiced by strict practitioners. But then on the other hand is the Bhagavat Vidhi. And Bhagavat Vidhi means to share Krishna consciousness, teach others about Krishna. Srila Prabhupada compared these two rails on a railroad track. You need both of them for the train to go forward. But if you can only do one, the Bhagavat Vidhi was more important. If you can't have deity worship, then at least have preaching. And if you can't worship the deities at this particular time, that's okay. The deity worship is actually for newcomers primarily. It's for the general public. It's a way where people who are not tuned in to the mission of Krishna can at least come and appreciate Krishna in awe and reverence. See, like the form of Krishna is so majestic, and the clothes he wears and the flowers and all of the beautiful architecture around him, everything is designed to inspire that mood of awe and reverence. Awe and reverence is the beginning of a relationship with Krishna. It is the first rasa called, anyone know the name of that rasa? Shanta rasa, yes. Shanta means like just awe and reverence. So that is the standard of theology for almost anybody in any faith, that, well, we worship God reverentially. One person said he thought it'd be a great idea if all the religions of the world could come together and share their common interest. Oh, you mean like worshiping a supreme being? No, that my faith is the best one. That's the one thing all religions have in common. But beyond that is the idea of God being great. You know, our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, thy will be done. God is great, and the whole idea of God as the powerful deity is meant to bring us to a point of humility, morality, self-control, and appreciation for some power beyond ourselves. But beyond that relationship, there are 4 more relationships that are more intimate. More intimate than just respecting God is what? Serving God, because yes, then there's a relationship. In this prayer, the Lord's Prayer, that expresses the Shantaras, our Father who art in heaven, give us this day our daily bread, forgive us our trespasses, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. So if you look at it, this is really like a little bit of a shopping list, isn't it? Dear God, give us our daily bread, lead us not into temptation, forgive our offenses, and deliver us from evil, please. By noon, if possible. No, just it's, you see what I'm saying? It's a series of requests. And they're all very nice requests, but it is short of the intimacy of saying, my dear Lord, what can I do for you? Here's what I need. Okay, but what could I do for you? That is dasya rasa, or the relationship of service. So this is where devotion begins, where there is a relationship based on not taking but giving. My friend Indradumna Maharaj was telling me this story about, he was flying to a wedding and about to officiate at a wedding. So on the plane, he somehow had a middle seat, and on his right was this elderly man, on his left was this elderly woman. So he sat between them, and then as the plane took off, they reached across his lap and held each other's hands. So he said, oh, I guess you're husband and wife. And they said, yep. He said, 60 years, we've been married, 60 years. And he told them, wow, well, I'm just going to officiate a wedding. He said, what's the secret of a long marriage? And the old man said, you gotta give more than you take. And the old lady agreed, she nodded her head. So this is the secret of a successful relationship, not only in a marriage, but between the devotee and the Lord. That we're coming to the Lord not for asking Him for things, but to offer our service to Him, our love to Him. And then the relationships become even more and more intimate. But that's for another time to discuss. The Murti, we come to the Murti with this prayer, please let me serve you. Hare Krishna means that, please let me serve you. Not what you can do for me, but what I can do for you. The deity is very reciprocal if we come in that mood. But if we do have problems and we do need something, we can also go to the deity. Srila Prabhupada said that, does anyone know which deity is particularly approachable with problems? What? No? It's Lord Balaram. He said, you can go to Lord Balaram and pray, my dear sir, my problem is such and such. You please tell me what to do. So it's not that Krishna doesn't care about our feelings and our problems. It's just that we want to offer the very best we can to Him. And if we can offer our service, that's the best. But if we have problems, we can also offer them to the deity. Just like when we're chanting, our minds may be all over the place, our hearts may be all over the place, and all we can do is say, Krishna, here I am with a disturbed mind and heart, but I'm chanting anyway, so you please accept it. That's all I've got to offer this morning, so you take it. That's all right. That's okay. It's better than saying, well, I'm just going to pretend that, oh, Krishna, I'm really focused on the holy name when in fact I'm all over the place. So being honest in our relationship with the deity is very important. We don't have to put on a facade, because Krishna knows anything already, right? Why are we going to fake him out? We're going to make him think that we're something that we're not. You know, just like one devotee said, Srila Prabhupada, what kind of person does Krishna want us to be? And Prabhupada answered in a very oblique way. He said, you are very sincere. And that's all he said. So what that means is that as if you could be someone other than who you are. So we don't have to change ourselves to worship the deity. We just have to go to Krishna honestly and sincerely and with an overall mood of wanting to give more than we take. All right, so I'll stop there. Any thoughts or questions? Okay, Esther?
Okay, my question is about the last thing you just said. Let's say there are people in this world who are spiritual, but they also do bad things. And they're okay with not reaching enlightenment because they accept that they may have to live another life. Is that okay? Because it's like you're going to God and you say, I know that I do bad things, but I try. Is it okay that the person is okay with living another life instead of reaching the spiritual land?
Well, it's okay for God because He'll let us do whatever we want to do. But do we really... A person who has that mood is probably not really aware of the implications of living another life. You know, there's so much suffering that goes with that. So I'll trade a little enjoyment right now for oodles of suffering later on, no problem. I mean, is that a good deal? Yeah, so people who might feel that way don't take it seriously, the fact that whatever suffering they're going through now is a result of what they've done in the past. They're not really taking responsibility for themselves. So it may appear to be very humble, but to actually consciously make that plan is not very bright. Not if we really understand what's going on in the process of birth and death. Okay, anything else? Nartan?
Thank you for the discussion, Prabhu. My question was about deity worship. That's we understand that this is the age of Sankirtan Yagya, and we also scriptures and Acharya so much emphasize that the name is everything.
Yeah.
Chanting is everything, or Sankirtan. So then why do we still have other practices if that chanting is sufficient?
Right. The main process for self-realization in previous ages was to worship the deity. But in this age, it's the holy name. Still, Srila Prabhupada wanted to engage his followers in activities that would purify them. So this is an example. Harinam is Bhagavat Vidhi. Deity worship is Pancharatrika Vidhi. So in a balanced spiritual life, both are going on. But if the deity worship can't be done, we still have the holy name. So it's just an additional step in purification. When Srila Prabhupada installed Radhashyama Sundar and Krishna Balaram in Vrindavan, he, for the sake of showing all the locals that were bona fide, he hired these expensive Brahmins from South India. Very highly respected Brahmins came. And before, when they were negotiating, they said, okay, well, we will require golden implements of pure gold. And then after the yagya, then we will keep them as our dakshin. Prabhupada said, forget. So they worked something out, more reasonable. And then they did the whole sacrifice. I was there, I saw this, all the rituals and mantras and formalities. And afterwards, Srila Prabhupada said, kirtan would have been sufficient. So for people who are kind of on the bodily platform, kind of attached to rituals, like the yogic Brahmins, right? They were attached to the rituals. So Krishna didn't tell them to stop. In fact, he told the wives, you just try to help them with their rituals. So it's an inferior way, but still a valuable way to approach the Lord and to connect with the Lord.
I had a small comment on what you were talking about. I was listening to Tamal Krishna Maharaj talk about Radha Kalachandji temple, and he mentioned that the temple room is actually smaller than the lecture hall, and it was a similar situation in Los Angeles. Is that Prabhupada told them have the temple room for the deities actually be smaller than the lecture hall, because he put the Bhagavat Vidhi over the Pancharachika Vidhi.
Okay, good example. In fact, when the devotees in Los Angeles converted the lecture hall into a bigger temple room, Prabhupada was displeased with that. They had not, and it was a big surprise, and he said, why have you taken out all the pews? It was a former church, and he liked those pews there so people could come and sit comfortably and hear about Krishna. But anyway, it was done by them. The temple room used to be where the museum is now, if you're familiar with Los Angeles. It's a smaller room, simpler place. Yeah. All right, anything else? Nandini Prabhu.
So Vidura was a pure devotee. He was pure, is it? But it's said that he went on pilgrimage because he wanted to rid himself from sin. And I wonder if you would just elaborate on that for everyone.
He had been with Dhritarashtra and Duryodhana, and therefore felt like he had been contaminated in their association. And so deity worship, yes, is good, or pilgrimage is good to just sort of put ourselves in the washing machine. We can bathe in the holy name anywhere, anytime. But the physical activity, you could say, of going on pilgrimage also draws our mind and body into the process more readily. Yeah. Because traveling is austere. And you take these austerity, why? Because I want to go see the Lord. So that whole effort is purifying. All right. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Radha Kalachandji ki jai.